You're watching StuyInterviews.
So I'm Mr. Juan. I teach honors physics. And if you ask me why I like teaching, it's because one, I like physics, and two, I just think it's an important job. If I were to talk about why I like teaching physics specifically, it's because physics answers all your underlying questions. And what's great is that physics also offers more questions after answering your underlying questions. So in class this week, we're going to talk about what electrons are and how we know what electrons are. That's not something you might have done in chemistry, that's not something you might have done in biology, but those two classes presupposed the existence of electrons, presupposed the movement of charge, and the transfer of electrons, but there are students who don't know what electrons are, who have not been formally taught what they are. I get to answer that in my class. So that's a really unique opportunity. In a few weeks, I'll talk about light. And light is its own thing. You can ask my students from last year, like, light is probably one of my favorite topics, and we're going to open up a completely new can of worms, and I think the culminating exercise for this second semester is to make sense of something you might have learned in chemistry. I don't want to spoil it for the kids that I teach now. But, you know, even outside of teaching physics, I think it's an important job because, you know, I think it was Fred Rogers who said that we don't get to become competent grown-ups who can make an honest living and who can do good in this world without people who believe in us and without investments from all sorts of people in all sorts of different ways. So one of the ways that I interpret that is that I have a duty to believe in students. I have a duty to work with students. I have a duty to make them feel like someone believes in them, to feel like someone will give their interests, their thoughts, their hobbies, their personal relationships, someone who will give them that time of day. Okay? Because there are people, you know, and I really do carry myself in this way. I assume whenever I deal with a student that I might be the only grown-up who will listen to them, right? I might be the only grown-up in that 24-hour span who will care about the drama in their sports team, who will care about, you know, the YouTube video they watched, who will care about, you know, what their friends said to them and how it bothered them. So I really do try and do that, and that's what motivates me to keep doing it. Yeah, that's why I teach, right? Both the novelty and the fun of physics, and just the importance of the work in other ways.
Hey, StuyInterviews. Thanks so much for asking me the question of why I teach. Took me a while to come up with an answer for this. I think I was trying to come up with a good metaphor, as an English teacher does, for why that might be. And I think it's because I'm kind of like a Pokemon as a teacher, and I'm in some form of evolving at this time. So I think there are a lot of reasons why I teach. When I first started out, I think my reasons were a little more simple, stuff that I still feel like, that I love reading books. My students know I love getting in a heated debate about one word or one line. I also love being wrong about something and being taught a new thing. So all of those things still exist for me, as well as a lifelong excitement about pens and erasers and other school supplies like that. But more recently, I would say my reasons for why I teach have become a little more complex. And I love this quote from Bell Hooks, who was a philosopher and a teacher, and I've mentioned it to some of my students in class. She says that the classroom remains the most radical space of possibility in the academy. Education is about the practice of freedom. And I think that's really why I teach now, is that I feel like, first of all, school allows you to figure out who you are, and also be whoever you want to be. And I believe that teachers can be mentors and partners in that. I've definitely figured out who I am while I've been a teacher at Stuy. And I also think that by reading and talking about our feelings and sharing our perspectives, we can really learn to love ourselves and each other in a way that can be transformative. So that is why I teach. I'm sure I will continue to evolve in the future. And I know all my students will too. And I look forward to watching them do that. Thank you.
My name is David Hanna, and I teach European history and American history. And I also teach a couple of electives, one on the Middle Ages and another on the Spanish Civil War. And this is my 11th year teaching at Stuyvesant, and it's my 27th year overall. And I taught here as a student teacher back in the fall of 1995. That's where I started, this rather is where I started my teaching career. So I have a kind of a long institutional memory at Stuyvesant. In terms of why I teach, it's because I'm really interested in history. I've always been interested in history since I was as far back as I can remember, like 5 years old. I've always been interested in history. And so without teaching history, there's no way that I'd be a teacher. I didn't get into teaching because I wanted to work with young people. I was interested in education in a larger sense. I have friends and colleagues who do, I think, or rather that's their main motivation. But for me, that's not it. And I respect that, but there's no way. I didn't get into teaching for that reason. And then some people have asked me, well, if that's the case, why didn't you try to pursue it further, teach in college, get a PhD and so forth? And what happened was that I majored in history in college, and then I came to New York and went to NYU for graduate school because they had a program specifically for a master's degree in social studies education. Most MAs, it's education, and so it allowed me to really, do both. And excuse me. And then I was a student teacher here, and then I wound up teaching in New York City schools, and then I went abroad and then came back. But the point being is that that's where I first taught in terms of having my own class, preparing my own lesson plans. And I found that for whatever reason, I had a fairly good rapport with this age group of students, and I liked what I did. So why, so the rationale for taking it further, just wasn't that compelling. And so I had some opportunities to perhaps do that, but I never took advantage of them, and I don't intend to at this point. And I don't regret it at all. I really like working with teenagers. It's interesting because high school, for me, my high school experience was, rocky. It was not like the best period of my life. So you would think that, high school, I wouldn't want to teach high school, but things work out that way, But also with history, this is my whole life. My family's first, but after my family, it's all history all the time. It doesn't stop. It's not just when I'm in class, or it's all the time. And it's always been that way. It's nothing new. I'm either, in terms of my life now, I'm either teaching, or I'm researching, or I'm writing about history. It's my life. And I'll tell you an interesting story. a few years ago, I connected with some people that I knew when I was in high school, or that age, teenagers, and we might not have gone to the same school, but we knew each other. And oftentimes, it's interesting when I first encountered people that I had went to school with, or people who taught me, and they asked me what I'm doing these days, and I said, "Well, I'm a teacher." But when I say I'm a teacher, they're like, "Really?" But then when I say I'm a history teacher, their reaction tends to be like, "Oh, that makes sense." You see what I mean? The distinction? Because they knew me when. And so, but I was always that way, so that doesn't change. And so, anyway, I was talking to this woman who we dated a little when we were young, and we were talking about what I was doing and everything. And she said, "Oh yeah, I remember you telling me when we were freshmen in high school that you were going to be a history teacher." I was like, "Really? I don't remember that." And so even then she was like, you knew what you were going to do. And it's interesting too, because I remember talking to one of my best friends in high school, telling him that I was going to move to New York and I was going to be a writer. And so I've been really fortunate that I've been able to do these two things. And I feel really lucky because I know that there are a lot of people, maybe a majority of people, who get up in the morning and go to work, and it's not something that they're looking forward to. It's something they got to do, and they do it, and then they go home, and that. But I really look forward to my job. I mean, I don't like grading. I'm not a big fan of all the teacher stuff that doesn't have to do directly with students, but I'm lucky. I pinch myself because I know how lucky I am, and also to teach at Stuyvesant, because I was here as a student teacher, and then that last semester when I was finishing my master's degree at NYU in the spring of '96, I was here pretty much every day as a sub, so I was here. And I was trying to get a job here, and there just wasn't a position. And so then I had to kind of hustle, and I got a job at the High School for Environmental Studies on West 56. And then the last second, before the school year 96-97 started, the principal at the time, Jinx Perullo, called me and said, "I got a job. Do you want it?" I'm like, "Yeah." And then, but the High School for Environmental Studies, the principal wouldn't release me. And I was so bummed, but it actually turned out great, because that school, at that point in my life, and the people who were working there, and it was a perfect fit for me. And I realize that now, and I was so lucky. And so, but I always wanted, get the opportunity, to come back. So anyway, I taught there for 4 years. Then I went abroad. I was abroad for 9 years. I taught in American international schools in Japan and in Brazil. So I missed the whole, pretty much the whole George W. Bush presidency. I was abroad. When I left, Bill Clinton was president. When I came back, Barack Obama was president. And then but then when I came back to work at a charter school, because one of my friends that I taught at High School for Environmental Studies, he was the dean of academics at this new charter high school they were starting. It was in West Harlem, and now they're in the South Bronx. And it was not a good fit for me. I'm not, charter school thing it's not for me. And but I didn't know that, so I had to, I kind of learn the hard way. And then I was left, I wanted to leave, but I had no job. And so that was a tough year for me. And then I wound up teaching at a school that was, it was a pretty tough school on the Lower East Side called University Neighborhood High School. And there were some good moments and some not so good moments. But those 3 years, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because those 3 years were kind of tough years. I mean, it was, it was a real challenge. So then when I got the job at Stuyvesant, I appreciated it way more, I think, than I would have if I hadn't had those 3 years when it was kind of tough. And so, that's why I say I pinch myself when I'm walking across the bridge over West Street, but I get to come and teach the students here who are really great. You guys, I don't think you appreciate it the way you should be. And then I'm teaching history, and also I get to teach it at a pretty high level, because the students here they can meet me where I'm at, most of the time. And that's not always the case, And so I put it this way. I'm not teaching college. However, I'm teaching history at a level with my students at the same level with me that is higher than most college history classes. Particularly, say like up through like 200 level history courses. So, I just feel really lucky.
So my name is Maria Nebudek Moore. Kids call me Dr. Ned or Dr. Nebudek Moore. I've been teaching at Stuyvesant since 2005. I'm a Stuy alum. My husband graduated from Stuyvesant. My husband and I graduated the same year. My father graduated from Stuyvesant. When I went to Stuyvesant, I wanted to do biology for a professional career. I wasn't quite sure how that was going to happen or what aspect of it I was going to do, but I knew that that was going to be an academic pursuit of some kind. So when I graduated high school, I started at MIT, and when I did my study at MIT, I decided that I wanted to apply for graduate school. I applied to a bunch of places, and among the programs that fit best with my interests was a program at Princeton University, the molecular biology program. And I enrolled there and then did some work and was able to get a PhD from Princeton. And from there, I got a postdoc at Harvard Medical School. And from there, I decided that I wanted to leave academic science, but sort of make a lateral move into secondary education for a variety of reasons. So my first job was teaching at a private school in New York City. And from there, I applied to something called the Teaching Fellows. And I had to go back to school, actually, and get an education degree, a master's in education, and a master's. I actually also got a master's in administration later on. So I have several master's degrees, a bachelor's degree, and a PhD. The PhD was going to be used to do academic science. But when I got the job at Stuyvesant, when I was a teaching fellow, I realized that I could apply that to some of the more specialized courses that we as teachers have the opportunity to teach at Stuyvesant. And I remember saying to myself when I started doing the teaching fellows, that if I could, because I was leaving an independent school and going into public school. And I remember saying to myself, if I couldn't get a job at Stuyvesant, I really wasn't sure I was going to continue teaching, because I wanted to be around that group of people who had that mindset about education and students who were driven to learn about things that I was interested in. And I was able to take just about all the stuff that I did in grad school and apply it to the courses that I taught at Stuyvesant and have been teaching for years. So when I started, I was teaching ecology and some biology courses. Then I taught still an honors biology class and a genetics class. Stayed with the genetics until last year when I went on parental leave and sabbatical. Then I started teaching AP Bio right after I got married in 2014, so that fall. And the advanced placement class has really given me the opportunity to understand like the context of what I was doing as a scientist in the sort of context of educating young people who are going to pursue this stuff in college. And why do I enjoy it? I mean, it's a lot of work, but I think the most fulfilling thing about it certainly is not the grading, unfortunately, even though that's sort of what the students are focused on. The most fulfilling thing about it is seeing someone go from maybe being a little bit tepid or lukewarm about a subject, not liking it very much, to liking it a lot or deciding they want to pursue it as a career. And a lot of those interactions and like a lot the knowledge that I have about who those people are doesn't happen in school. A lot of them don't really know what they want to do yet. I don't, and even if they do, they don't always tell me. A lot of them are very shy. It's usually that I find out when I run into someone on the street 10 years later, and it takes me a while to figure out who it is, or someone sends me an email after 10, sometimes 20 years. telling me, hey, I decided to pursue this and it was because of something you did or something you said. So why teaching is like, you don't know why you're doing it or what the purpose is or whether it's benefiting someone until they tell you. And most of them don't say anything. It's a very, very small group of students who say something, and they say it sometimes when they're students, but it takes them, I think, some time and some maturity to realize the context of what they were receiving from me, or certain things I did or said, certain things I took them to do. There are certain things that I was the first to do at the school, like these genetics trips where we do the genomic profiling and all that stuff. I did that the first year I started teaching genetics. It was in 2006. So it was a long time ago, and I was the only teacher in the school doing it for a very, very long time. Also getting funding. I've been regularly funded by the PA and alumni for doing that for almost 20 years. And like, those things are really popular because students rarely have those experiences, even sometimes in the colleges they go to. So it's an academic thing, but it's also a personal thing because there are field trips involved. There's a lot of preparation. It's a personal connection, and it's something that teaches them about themselves because they're profiling the student's own genetic material. But then, and those, that's really sort of geared toward the really very driven students who are extremely focused on, maybe following that as a career. But there are many students I teach who aren't going to do biology or genetics as a career and are doing it to fulfill a requirement, or they have a sort of marginal interest and they want to learn a little more. And sometimes they don't do as well as they might like. And this is sort of the other reason about why teaching is important and why do it. They need to perform well, or they need to sort of, they're usually in one of my courses because they need it for their degree from Stuyvesant. So those students, and fulfilling their needs, and how shall I say, making them feel like it was worthwhile, and they pass and they do well in the class, is as important as catering to and supporting the students who may pursue that stuff. So even if someone isn't doing that well and they're not feeling good about it, supporting them, I feel sometimes, and someone may disagree with me, but I feel that supporting the students who are working harder at it and it isn't coming as easily is more important and more valid and more real. Because maybe why they're not getting it or not doing as well could be very complicated. There could be something going on at home. They might not get it just for a lot of reasons. They might have something going on in their own personal lives that has nothing to do with family or anything. There could be a lot of reasons why someone's not doing well. And supporting that person and making sure they excel and that they get something out of it and that they feel whole as a person and that they feel happy and that they feel right and that they don't feel marginalized or scared or worried that they're going to fail a class. Those people, all of those people, are more important to me than ever before in my career. That changed a little bit over time. It depended on who I was teaching and what I was teaching. But I came to that realization probably about a little bit less than 10 years ago. I started realizing that the students who were having a harder time, it was more important to make sure that they got through than it was necessarily the students who were, fighting between a 98 and 100. Because they were going to do fine, and that margin wasn't going to matter for them. Whether they got a 98 or 100 wasn't going to matter for them. But whether someone gets a 65 or an 80, that's huge. That I don't know that all the students at Stuyvesant realize how huge that difference is, and how personal that is for a student. Whether they have a respectable performance in the class or whether they can't pass it. So for me, those margins and those issues have meant more as an educator than any other sort of thing that I do where I have that kind of control, because I have a shocking and scary amount of control over people's lives when I write those grades.
Yeah.
Consider it extremely like almost sacred. I'm not sure everybody has the same attitude about it. I get very nervous when I enter grades. I like obsess over them. I look back at the spreadsheet. I make sure I didn't make a mistake. It's not like you can't fix it when you make that kind of mistake, but still, even if you make a mistake, the shock to a student, like it's very jarring if they see a number that they don't understand, and to the parents as well. So I take extremely a great deal of caution with it, and a lot of pride in making sure that I do it right.
Thanks for watching. Bye.